Dr. Jazz.
Because I know you're probably really busy. You're on so many records. I have even your name just keeps on repeating on so many records, and I just wanted to start this talk by asking you one, like, maybe stupid question, but maybe even not. You know, I saw you on the last record from This Place by Pat Metheny. You mentioned Pat also, and you worked as an arranger there, like. And America Undefined and some other stuff. And how is it like to work? How did this thing happen? Like, especially for this record, but especially what I'm interested in, you know, you're working with some of the most creative minds and composers. And how is it when they call you? Like, I don't know, whether it's Esperanza or Pat or Paul Simon or whoever, how much freedom do you have for when doing an arrangement, or how does this process work actually? I mean,
well, okay, that is a good question, you know, and especially on America Undefined. I'll go back to Secret Story, actually.
Oh man, I love that. Yeah.
Which is a little bit, for me, a little bit of a sad story in a way, because in the sense that Pat called me right before he started to do it, and he said, "Gil, I see that you're arranging a lot." And he goes, but mostly I see records you're arranging for horns and woodwinds. He says, do you arrange for strings? And I said, I do, but honestly at that point, and honestly in general, I came a little bit late to arranging. I mean, I started arranging really when I met Gil Evans, which was kind of 82, 83, and I started to really say, no, arranging. And then I started to get more and more opportunities to arrange. I had done some arrangements before, but it really wasn't until I met Gil that I really dedicated myself to him and his music and trying to understand what it was that he did. Because honestly and truly, I didn't really know Gil's music before I really met him, and you know, I was almost put off by it. It was so big, you know, and I would hear, like, you know, sketches of Spain, and I'd go, what is that? You know, it was so perplexing to me. It seemed so complicated and so overwhelming that I almost avoided it. And I did, really. And then once I met Gil,
How did this happen? Just a small detour here. Like, how did
Gil I met when I was working with Billy Cobham, also in the 80s. Billy did a series of concerts in Lugano, Switzerland, and it was supposed to be part of a music education program which never quite developed, and it just became a couple different concerts that we did, and one was with Gil. And the evening of this particular evening was Gil Evans and Louis Bellson big bands, and it was Billy played with Louis Bellson.
Wow.
I know.
Man, okay.
and then Gil played, and when I walked into the hall, I saw Gil sitting at a table with hundreds of pieces of paper around him, and he seemed so charming to me. You know, it's just like I didn't expect him to be the person that I saw there, and he was kind of still searching and trying to put parts together, and I just really loved him and his style of working, and it was completely different than Louis Bellson's approach. Nothing against Louis Bellson, but that was like, here it is,
Yeah.
here's the carton, and then Gil's thing was very loose. I don't know if it was it is a concert called the Gil Evans Orchestra live in Switzerland, I think.
Okay, check it out.
It is available, and also the Louis Bellson is available, and that's how I met him, and I became fascinated with him, and we kind of became kind of fast friends. We were like, old friends reacquainted.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So, and then I also, on that trip, I met my wife in Switzerland, and then I ended up staying in Switzerland for about a year.
Oh,
Then I came
wow.
back to the States. Yeah.
That's so cool. Wow.
Yeah. And I met really the first time that I played with Mike Brecker, who was in that big band also.
Oh man, really? Yeah, because I wanted to ask you about Mike later. I mean, I love wide angles.
That was the first time that I actually, I think, really worked with Mike Brecker.
But didn't you do something with Pat Martino, and the Brecker brothers were there on that one record? No, like with Pat?
No.
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 No, okay, then yeah.
You might be thinking, I think you're thinking of the record that was done with Jack Wilkins.
Maybe,
Is that
maybe.
possible?
Yeah, maybe.
Jack
maybe.
Wilkins,
Yeah.
which I hoped I would have done, because it was recorded by a guy that recorded my first record, Fred Miller, and he was somehow involved with Jack, and they had done a gig at the at Sweet Basil, and I was dying to play on that record. But I feel very lucky that a lot of people I met at the right time. It might have been a little early for me, and it might not have been the perfect situation at that point. And so I waited and waited, which happens a lot in my career. And then I meet the person, and it seems like this was the right time to meet somebody who was kind of a hero, an idol of mine. And I had that. But the first time I met Mike, it was not really a real working relationship. We were just in this group and kind of hanging out together. Well, we didn't have a real thing together. It was just, we were there and we became acquainted.
Okay.
So that's what it was. But getting back to Gil Evans, so then I started arranging. What was your question? Sorry.
No, it's beautiful, man. It's just I love you have so much history, and I love that. That's improv. No, we started with Pat Metheny, Secret Story, and
oh right with Pat Metheny, right. So Pat called me and asked me, do I arrange for strings? And again, honestly and truly, it was a little early. If he had asked me to arrange the whole record, I did arrange the one song that had really horns, which was called See the World.
Oh yeah.
That one he asked me to. It was basically an orchestration, because that was a very, like working with Mike. They have the song pretty much worked out, and your job as an arranger is to really orchestrate it properly and make it sound best it can, and then you can add in some some of your own voice. But that was mostly an orchestration job. And and I did work with Pat on a film called Map of the World.
Map of the World. I have a CD of that.
Yeah. So I orchestrated that. But honestly and truly, with that and Secret Story, Pat knew pretty much exactly what he wanted in the orchestra. He had pretty much figured it out on the synclavier, and he really just wanted, again, orchestration. Now, when he asked me to do America Undefined, I was kind of expecting that, and there was a very short deadline, and he was like, the Gil, this is a complete open palette. He had the
Oh, that's good.
quartet,
Yeah.
had been recorded, and it was like, what do you hear?
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
It was beautiful, but it was very
Challenging.
intimidating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And challenging. I really was like, okay,
So
and it was
how do you start with that then? Let's say in this case, what's your process? I mean, I'm really curious.
well, in that case, there was a very short deadline, and I didn't have time to really think that much ahead, and I didn't really even have time to really learn the songs and get them in my head so they could cycle. So I literally sat down and started working in Sibelius.
Wow.
I just went, I first decided on the size of the orchestra and told Pat, and he said, "That sounds great. Good. Go." And then I just really started going, and I have to say, I really did get kind of a flow going from the beginning where it felt like this is good. This is flowing and it's moving, and I kind of started to know what to do right away.
Yeah.
And
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
so
But is it usually like the case then if you present, in this case, to Pat or to whoever, that you show them your first version of draft,
right.
your work, and do you have to change then things, or usually it's like, okay, that's it, or how?
Well, I did have some meetings, at least two meetings
Okay.
with Pat, where we went through, and he was very particular about, I think the orchestra would come in here. I think this is I hear this, and he gave me a lot of, groundwork that was already kind of decided. But the meetings with Pat, when I had finished it, were pretty much, oh, Gil, great. I mean, amazing.
So good.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, the only really thing he said, he was worried about the first violin seemed a little high to him, but it was a kind of a minor suggestion because he was worried about how he would keep it, mixed in with the quartet. If it was so high, he thought it was going to dominate. So that was really his only suggestion,
That's good, yeah. That's beautiful.
So, but as an arranger, you always have to be prepared and accept the fact that it's not your finished product. And I'm very flexible with everybody. When they say, "Hey, well, I have an idea and I have this, and could we?" You can't fight. It's like a film composer. You can't say, no, that's not going to work. You have to. That's your job. You're trying to, I mean, that's the way I look at producing. You can't strong arm a production and go listen, this is what I'm hearing here. It's not your project. You have to make this person's project sound the best that it can, but they have to agree with that.
Of course. Sure, of course.
You
Makes
can't
sense.
strong arm anything in producing or arranging.
Yeah.
Or anything.
Sure. It's a team player thing, kind of like.
I think so.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think the best arrangers are people that are, collaborators to the highest degree, and that the same way with the analogy to comping. There are some piano players and guitar players that happen to be very good accompanists, compers, and it's almost as important as soloing, in their mind, and that makes them a good comper. So the same thing with arranging, and by the same token, there are people that are, their most important thing is their expression, and that's the artists, like the Paul Simons and the Pats and the people that really they want to present their musical voice,
Yeah.
and it's an important urge in them.
Yeah.
And I don't think every arranger has that. I don't think I have that, as like, I want to present my music. This is it. I do compose, and I
definitely.
can compose, but it's not a burning passion of mine.
Interesting.
For better or worse. For better or worse.
Oh yeah. Well, I think you've already the first album, like it says, pure as rain, right? It has so many.
Oh my God,
man! But it's beautiful compositions. Like, especially I listened to it the other day, like the trio tracks with Jeff and Bob Moses. Man, that's burning stuff. Really, like really, it's like.
Thank you so much. I mean, literally, they just re-released that. I had only had a vinyl copy of it for all these years, and I kept saving them because I said, boy, if I lose that, that's it, they're gone. And then they re-released it. But thank you, but again.
No, but you mentioned Paul Simon. Then let's say like that Love and Hard Times, the track, which is again, like whatever Paul does for me, it's I've been a fan for ever since I remember I started listening to music. Is the procedure with Paul the same like as with Pat then? I mean, it's a kind of different genre, of course, but
it's really not. I mean, with Paul on that particularly, I mean, he did a record after the record that he did after that. I heard he was very quick and just said to arrangers, go ahead, arrange it and let's play it. Okay, good. With me, it was like, and I don't know with other arrangers, but we got together, as he wrote in the liner notes, innumerable times. And we really did. I mean, it was like, well, to be honest, also, Mark Stewart, the way I met Paul a couple different times, but the last time that I really made a connection with him was Mark Stewart said Paul wanted somebody to work with to refresh his harmonic knowledge and maybe like kind of take lessons. And so I said, he said, would you be interested to meet with him like that? I said, oh, of course. Are you kidding? So, he has studied guitar with Chuck Loeb, not Chuck Loeb, Vic Juris.
Vic Juris. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Wow, man.
Yeah. Am I right about that? Yes, I think it was Vic Juris. And also Chuck Israels, he did work with for a while. So he has a great, like all of us, you want to keep developing and learning. Even at his level, he's like, is there something more I can do? But our lessons quickly turned into that I started to help him on the record, and I don't even honestly remember the name of the record that I started working with him, but it was the one produced by
Not So Beautiful or So What, no, right now. Even before.
I did work on that record, but it might even have been the record before that.
Ah, shit, yeah.
And I don't really remember, or it was called like Surprise or something. Okay. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name.
No, sure.
And it was produced by, I'm really drawing blanks today, but by the producer, Brian Eno.
Oh, really?
Brian Eno produced it.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm going to say it was called Surprise, or there's a baby's picture on it. And we really started working together on, he just would like, ask questions about, what do you think about, what chord what do you think? And then it got very hands-on right away,
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we worked on that, and then there was the other record that you said that we also worked on, and then then this arrangement, which really we spent a lot of time talking about, but then at some point I went out to dinner with Phil Ramone and Paul at a restaurant on the South Shore of Long Island, and it was like, okay, let's decide when we're going to do this. Let's do it in 3 weeks, and that's it. So it went from really just talking about it to really fast. Let's decide the instrumentation and then write the arrangement. And I was like, oh, and it was just when I was starting the record with Esperanza. So it was really not great timing, but as usual in my career, things usually come together and I go, oh boy.
As always,
you know, right? And so I said, all right, now I have to sort out. And so it went down kind of like that and pretty quick. And
that's a good thing. Come on, you have Paul Simon and Esperanza working at the same time, man. That's like, wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. And then it turned out coincidentally that we were working at a studio that Paul came into. It was the Bennett Studios in New Jersey. And he came in to do something on his record, and we were mixing in the next room, and he was kind of a fan of Esperanza's, and so he wanted to talk to Esperanza, and we were like kind of hanging out, like, and I was like, wow, hey, we got to mix a record. We don't have a big budget like yours. We only got a day left here, and it was kind of funny. But anyway, that's my memories. And then, but everybody's process is different with records and with making arrangements for people. It's always a different path, I can say. Yeah. Completely.
But it's probably a nice thing, right? That you basically get a composition and then you can, it's like getting a baked, I don't know, cake, and then you can do all the stuff around it, what you want. It's probably interesting, right?
I enjoy the arranging process, whatever, in all its many splendored ways,
Yeah.
It's still kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah, I would say so too. Yeah. But Gil, I wanted to ask you this. Just to return back to Pat, I've read somewhere you already go back with Pat like to the early 70s, right? Or
well, I met Pat at the University of Miami.
Yeah.
I think it was 1973.
Oh man,
I was there at school.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And Pat was a student for. I was there getting a master's, and Pat was about 3 or 4 years younger than me, and he had been there for about a year and a half, and he left in the middle of that semester to go to Boston to start working with Gary Burton. That's where I met him, and it was, I met Pat and Jocko that semester.
Jocko was in Miami, of course.
He was in Miami, not at school, but I heard them play within the first 2 days I was in Miami, and I was like,
how was that
okay.
like?
Yeah, well, it's like a new reality. I went, okay, I've never heard anything like this, and I don't really know how to place it. So I felt like I was in a different path all of a sudden, because all the great players that I heard in Washington, D.C., where I was from, I went, well, they're trying to kind of play like Coltrane, or, this is like this, but it was all vaguely familiar, but they were not familiar, they were really not familiar because they were fully formed at the ages that I met them,
That's
it was
incredible.
like, so it was like, okay, all right. And I have to say, in all honesty, I did not feel, again, ready at that point to say, all right, I'm going to work with Jocko. I'm going to work with Pat, I just felt like, I have a lot to learn. I have a lot to develop. And I'm so happy that I got to work with Pat and to work together with him. And I'm so sad I didn't get to work with Jocko, because by the time I would have been ready, Jocko had kind of gone off the deep end, and I went, oh boy, I missed that opportunity. And he's actually how I met Pat Martino, because
Oh, really?
how did this work? I went to Berkeley on Pat's suggestion to talk to Gary Burton about teaching there, and I drove up, I guess, from New York, where I was staying at my cousin's place in the East Village, and he was doing a gig with Jocko and Danny Gottlieb, I think, at a club. So, and after that, he said, "Man, I want to come into New York." I said, well, I have a place you could probably stay at my cousin. So he was staying at my cousin's house, and there he just said to me, "Hey man, I just met Pat Martino in Philly," because what was his connection to Philly was that his dad was living in Philly. I think I'm confused about where Jocko was really from now.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah, but his dad at that point was in Philly, and he was in Philly, and he called up Pat, and they got together and played. And he said, "You want to play with Pat Martino? Here's his number." And he wrote it out. And he said, "Call him up."
And then you did, actually? Like, you called
And I
him?
did. I just
How was that, like, this call? Like,
yeah.
how did this happen?
It was funny. I mean, I just called him up and I said, "Hello, it's Pat Martino." I was very sheepish, and he was like, "Yes." He has a very deep voice on the phone, and I always pictured him, even though I had seen him play live at Wolf Trap, is a theater in Washington, D.C. I couldn't really tell his size.
Yeah.
And on the cover of The Visit, he looked like a very big guy. He looked like he was 6'5", and then I said I'd like to come and meet him, and I drove to his house, and I remember the door open, and he was, the little Pat, and we just kind of hugged, and it was kind of like when I met Gil Evans. I felt, okay, we're an item here. We're gonna work together somehow.
So beautiful.
And Jocko said to me, he said, "Listen, man, when you go meet him, write a song that's really challenging, and he'll want to play that."
So that was Open Road, or?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Really?
Yeah. So I wrote that thinking of Pat, and I said, "Hey Pat, we got together, and it wasn't like, you want to play Funny Valentine." I said, "I got this tune, you want to play it?" And Pat was like, "Oh man, I like this. Do. And Pat even named it. He said, we were playing it, he says, "I'd like to name this tune, man, Open Road." I said, "Okay."
That's amazing.
You got it, So, that was kind of my lucky path, which I've been on ever since, just like how things lead from Pat to Jocko to Pat Martino to just moving on. Yeah.
But this was where you living when you started playing with Pat Martino. You basically moved to New York before that, right?
Well, I really was still living in Washington, D.C., where I was from. And then I started playing with Pat. And then he had an apartment. I moved to New York, actually, after I played with Pat. And at that point, he had put the other group together with Joyous Lake. His manager found them, and I moved to New York, and I went, "Oh, now there went my gig," So then I was in New York, and I go, "Well, now I'm in New York looking for for gigs.
How were those first weeks like when you moved to New York? Like
first weeks, it was almost first years, trying to meet people and, moving through various circles and,
yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. But that record will be together again that you did with Pat.
Right.
Did you guys play like a lot of gigs, like a lot of touring, or how was that process like with you guys playing? I mean,
well, when I did play with Pat the most, we did a tour as a quintet, and we didn't play any of that kind of music. We were playing his tunes, which were kind of fusionish kind of, yeah. And it was Jeff Berlin, Anton Fig, me and Pat, and a guy named Bob Hanlon, who I never heard of since. He played tenor sax. Oh, wow. And that was the quintet. And then, we came back, and Pat started to, he had to do his, finish up his contract with Muse Records, so he had to do 2 records. So he said, okay, we're going to do 2 records, a duet and a quartet record. And then I really helped Pat a lot, I think, with his first Warner Brothers record. We worked very close. Starbright, right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And I was almost kind of a producer with him, even though I didn't even know what a producer was at that time. But, I was helping him get the music together. I remember coaching Will Lee and getting the parts ready for Will to play on a song. And it was, we had a session that's really the first time that I worked with Mike and Randy. We booked a horn session for
that's what I meant before. Yeah, the Starbright album with Pat. Yeah.
I don't even remember what that horns seconds was. It actually on the record? I haven't heard it in so long.
Yeah.
Well, it really, in all humility and honesty, it didn't go that great. But literally, Pat said to me the night before the session, he goes, "Gil, we have the horns coming in tomorrow. Maybe you should write an arrangement."
Oh, man.
And I was like, yeah. I gotta write an arrangement. And all I can say is everybody was incredibly kind and helpful with me, standing in front of them, shaking and not knowing what the right answer was. And I remember Alan Rubin was also playing trumpet, and he said, "Look, I have an idea. I think the chords are a little too much in the arrangement, but I think the melody is good, and we can all play that melody and we'll be fine." And he helped me turn it into something that was kind of okay and usable. But that was probably my first arrangement, and it just goes to show that you can really start on a not so great note, and you can learn.
Yeah, definitely.
and I dedicated myself to learning even more after that, and pretty much the same way. I can't believe this, but I did some arrangements for Ray Barretto, and it was almost exactly the same way. He said, "Gil, I want to do some arrangements tomorrow on this," and it was like, really? In a funny kind of way, it's a good training for an arranger, because you very often. Do you do a little arranging?
Yeah, I did for like a string orchestra and stuff like that.
Right. So. Okay.
Well, but you now it's easier with with all the Sibeliuses and stuff like that. And,
right.
But
a little easier.
A little easier, but at least the range automatically. It shows you like you don't have to search
It
for.
definitely helps. Yeah.
Yeah, like, but I can imagine you, like in 1977, there was no Google or whatever, so it's like, okay, so how do I do a
And
viola or whatever? I wouldn't know that.
yeah. Yeah, not only
Yeah.
that, but there was the challenge of, okay, I wrote the arrangement. I'm not going to hire a
Yeah,
copyist
exactly.
at that point. So, I mean, all of my arrangements kind of up to the time when I was doing bigger and more elaborate arrangements for, let's say, I did some for Milton Nascimento
Yeah,
when
yeah.
Matt Pearson was at Warner Brothers. He hired me to do that, and I wrote them all by hand, and I
Wow,
copied
man.
all the parts,
Beautiful.
and even Wallace Rhodey,
Yeah.
his record Mysterios, I wrote my little sketchy scores and just copied parts out for everybody. So that
Wow.
changed dramatically, like you say, with
Yeah,
Sibelius.
yeah, or whatever.
So,
Yeah.
or
So,
whatever. Yeah.
yeah.
I ended up starting with Sibelius too.
Yeah, but it's a good way to learn on a Pat Metheny and Ray Barretto records. That's not a bad start.
I don't know if I really learned there, but I
I mean,
learned that arranging is hard.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
you have to have a lot of experiences, and I
yeah,
was lucky to have those were two learning experiences, let's say.
yeah, yeah. Beautiful. But we're talking like 1977, 76, and I know
Yeah.
We'll Be Together Again is 76, I think.
Right.
And Pure as Rain came out 1977, and I wanted to ask you. It's a beautiful record. There are some amazing tunes like that November Child
Thank you.
that you play. I love that one with, it's especially, like I said, I love the trio tunes, but how did you decide to make that record to become a band leader? Like,
Well,
how was the story there?
I wanted to, it was about the time when I was in New York that, all the people that I was looking up to were making records. So I said, I am writing tunes, and I would love the opportunity to make a record. And I guess it happened because I did a record with this guy Ernie Krivda, who was a tenor player,
Saxophone player.
yeah, and the engineer Fred Miller kind of heard me, and he liked the way I played on a ballad on the first record, and he asked me to do that record for
Oh, wow.
for Chiaroscuro, for
Yeah.
that label. And I had been playing a lot with Jeff Berlin at that time. We had played on a lot of different gigs. He was actually a neighbor of mine in New York. And Bobby, I was always a fan, and
Yeah, but man,
and whenever I played Bob Moses, whenever I played with him, I felt elevated and happy.
Such a player. Yeah.
I sent him a copy of the record, and he would always, every time I would see him over the last years, he said, "Man, I'd love to get a copy of that record." And I said, when it came out, they said, "Do you know somebody that we could send?" I said, "You have to send it to Bobby." And he really loved it, and he gave me such a good review on the phone other day. I was so flattered. And he remembered the story, which I even remembered, that the song November's Child, we did 2 takes, and it was the same exact form, and we just played it twice, and both times they came out to the exact same timing. It was like 4:23, and Bobby remembered that. He says, "Talk about good time, man." He said, "I really like your rhythm and your feel, man. You really got a great feel. And just look at the time. We played it exactly the same."
Yeah. So beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so beautiful. I mean, throughout the years, then you did like all these. I've done these talks with Bob Mintzer also. That's a beautiful record you guys did as a duo, and all the other stuff. I was surprised through the years by that Elton John record. I mean, I love Elton John, but I was like, man, really? Like,
well, I mean, it's a funny coincidence too, because I was kind of had a lazy day yesterday, and I was flipping through YouTube, and
Oh yeah.
and I found that record, and the story, the most important part of the story of that record is Pietro Tonello,
Oh yeah.
who, when I lived in Switzerland, when I met my wife, he was in Milano, and I met
Okay.
him and started playing with him, and then he started calling me for. I've done so many records and so many gigs with Pietro, and I love the way Pietro plays. I mean,
Yeah. It's
he's
beautiful song.
so he's again one of these guys that it's more about even accompanying than his solos. You know,
Yeah.
he always, starts his solo coming out of what's happening, and he's
Yeah.
totally so he told me the story, and that I think is the first and only time I ever worked with Paul Motion, who's
Yeah. I wanted to
somebody
ask you
else.
that. Yeah. How was that
Yeah,
like?
well, it was great. No, I'm wrong actually. We did another gig together with Paul. We did, and I don't even remember
Hmm.
what that gig was, but it was with Pietro. But
Oh,
I mean, I'm a total fan of
yeah.
Paul's.
Me too.
From going back to the trio with Bill,
Yeah.
and so the long short story of it is that um, Pietro was at a piano, and he was with this label. I think it's called Oblique Records,
Oh yeah.
and
No. Yeah.
and
Exactly. Yeah.
and he just played a little bit of uh, uh, Elton John song that he knew, and the guy from the record company said, "Hey, that's it. We'll do a."
Man. Oh, that's so funny.
And he joked on there's a promo of it, and he said, Gil had actually worked with Elton John because I do these rainforest concerts for Sting and Trudy, and Elton is always there. He said, and Steve was a big fan of Elton John, so it was a very natural
Steve
thing.
Swallow or.
Steve Swallow,
Oh
yeah.
really? Oh wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And he said, and I don't think that Paul knew it was Elton John music until he came to the studio. No, that's the other record that we did. We did a tribute to Ellington's music
Oh
that we
really? Oh
played
wow.
in Vicenza, Italy, and we
Oh.
did a live record from there, which I'm really very fond of that record. I haven't seen it
I have to check it
in
out. Okay.
in
No.
the world. My saddest part of we did a duet on there that was really such it was called Dancers in the Night that Pietro and I played, and that's a funny that's a funny Paul Motion story because we really had an unbelievable chemistry. I was surprised myself. He would pause and I would pause with him, and we'd
Oh
go
yeah.
faster and slower, and it was unbelievable. And it started off, not to toot my own horn, but it really surprised me. And it was a hard song to play, like a Duke Ellington song that I
Yeah.
played on accordion. I tried to play the bass line and the chords and keep the whole orchestra going. And and he said, "Gil, play an introduction." And then, or no, he said, "Oh, Gil," on stage, he goes, "I forgot my music backstage for dancers in the whatever it was called." And he said, "Play an introduction." And literally, I mean, it was like I had to play like 7 minutes.
Oh man.
you know
Jesus.
but I like playing with Pat when I did
Yeah.
the Antonia thing.
Man. Yeah.
I
So good.
Yeah, so I got into that thing of, okay, I can do a spontaneous thing on that. But I just kept playing, and I kept looking up, and I said, he's not back yet. And I kept playing, and then we played this duet, and Paul on stage said, "Really, man, I mean, you guys, did you rehearse that for weeks? I mean, come on. Well, he was like, he was so blown away by that, which I was so complimented by, that he
That's
was
a
like,
cool guy.
come on, what's going on here?
So beautiful, man. That's
And
so
the other story that I remember, I hope it's not disrespectful to say, but I guess Paul wasn't used to always reading music,
yeah,
and there was a lot of charts, and Steve Swallow went, wow, I've got to make a note of this. Paul Motion reading charts.
Oh man.
So, and they had such a long, beautiful history that it was just a nice experience. And so was the Elton John record. And,
Yeah. Beautiful tunes like Blue Eyes and all that. I mean, it's beautiful tunes already, like,
Yeah. And,
yeah.
and it was, that's the best thing for me of doing jazz records, when it's not over rehearsed and we just kind of feeling out, to me, that, that's what made a lot of Miles's records, but particularly Kind of Blue, they came in and they say, this is what we're doing. And everybody went, really? Okay. We're going to play 16 bars of D minor. Okay. I don't remember doing that before, really. And so you have a chance at spontaneity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's so beautiful. But Gil, I wanted to ask you this.
Sure.
You mentioned, I'm a guitarist, so I was going to ask you this probably, but you mentioned about the accompanists, and the greatest guitar accompanist ever for me is Jim Hall, of course.
Right.
What he did with Sonny, and playing intervals and single note lines, not chords, and all across the city. By the way, it's also one of my favorite records by Jim. Also, you do the Bemsha Swing and Prelude to a Kiss. I love that stuff, and I wanted to ask you, like, how was it to play with Jim? Like, you as he's a guitarist and you're a piano player. I mean, in that case, it can be like really terrible sometimes, but when I listen to you guys, it's like, man, it's so beautiful.
That's a myth to me, that it should be not honestly and truly. It's partly fueled by the fact that I had a teacher, I'm not going to mention his name, but at a college that I went to, that said, I really hate the sound of piano and electric guitar. And I said, and no, it was fueled by the fact that I played with Pat Metheny at his farewell concert at the University of Miami. And I said, hey, come and hear this. I'm playing with Pat. He goes, I hate that sound. And it really made an impression on me, like, I love that sound. Are you kidding me? That's so important to me. If I think back to so many records that I love, with electric guitar and piano, or
it's like
electric.
Jim Hall and Bill Evans, man. It's like
hello,
already.
So again, Jim is one of those guys that I always wanted to work with. I almost stalked him when I first moved to New York. I would go to gigs and I'd say, hello, my name is Gil Goldstein. I did the same shy, kind of pathetic thing. And with Jim, it turned out that I was playing with the Gil Evans Orchestra in Brazil.
Oh, wow.
And he was there with Michel Petrucciani, he had a workshop he was going to give. And Jim doesn't really like doing workshops. I watched one yesterday again on YouTube, and he just, by himself, he doesn't like being in the limelight and talking about it. He would rather play and say, this is what I do. So I got there early to Jim's workshop, and by that time we were friendly and knew each other. And he said, oh, Gil, you're here. Would you please play with me? He says, I really don't like doing these things. And I was like, that's it. Here it is. This is the moment. This is what I was waiting for. And so I get up there and sit at the piano, and he goes, let's just play free.
Oh, wow, man.
So, what I think he wanted to do, he didn't want to play Prelude to a Kiss. He said, I want to see how Gil here, this is my assumption. He just wanted to, can this guy hear, and can he really accompany and play with me? So
Yeah.
I assume, in my memory, I don't remember how it sounded really, but I assumed that he started and I followed him, and we found a little path, and it was the end of the piece. And it was enough of an audition, and probably we played a tune after that, but it was enough of a thing for him to go, I can play with Gil, and he knows how to play with me. And that, in addition to the fact that when I started playing and trying to learn how to play jazz, I played along with all his trio records, like Live in Toronto.
Yeah.
I would play along with it even at half speed on my turntable. It would be
wow.
like do 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 do. I could really get in there and feel his time feel, and it wasn't like frantic speed. I mean, nothing was really frantic speed, but even slower I could think. I still think that's a great way to learn how to play. So once I started playing with him, it was very natural, and I felt like I had played with him always, when we started playing.
Yeah.
And I think the first gigs were, we did it with just Steve Laspina and I, and we played, a couple trio gigs like that. And then we did a gig at the Vanguard. Maybe the Vanguard was actually our first gig, and I think Tom Harrell couldn't make the gig at the last minute, and he called me. Or maybe it was Frizzell couldn't make it.
Wow.
And then he said, you come on in and you play, and bring in some of your synths, because Bill kind of has those kind of sounds, and you kind of, you can do some of your things. So I had probably my DX7 in there, and my Akai sampler, and the record. I'm honestly kind of amazed by that record, because I did all the synth stuff totally live, and I had like a little volume pedal for the Akai sampler, and I was just like, ding, and I was just kind of going between the electric, the DX7, and it was really pretty hit and miss. I mean, I could have really missed very easily with one. It was God was on my side there.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful to hear you play with Jim is like really. I think when I teach students, almost everyone who then go into jazz, I give them that one solo. You'd be so nice to come home to. I think it's from the Concerto album.
I have to check that out.
Man, it's like, he starts like with like kind of like Sonny on St. Thomas, this intervallic thing.
Right.
Like, man, it's so.
I'm gonna listen to that.
Man. Yeah, please do. It's just incredible. It's really incredible. But speaking of Jim and touring, I wanted to ask you this already before. With whom did you go to Europe for the first time, like for an extended tour? And when was that? With Pat Martino or?
No, I never went with Pat. In the early days, I went later. Earlier, it was Billy Cobham.
Billy
started, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
How did the story with Billy begin, by the way? And that Stratus, thing and all that, like, where does this begin with Billy? Because it's funny, not funny, but it speaks of your amazing skills that you at the same time you're playing with Jim Hall, who's like total opposite of, let's say, Billy Cobham, for instance.
I know. I know. I know. I know. That's kind of funny. Yeah. Well, Billy came about that I was he was doing a gig in New York. It was exactly like this, and they were playing at 7th Avenue South,
Mhm.
and I think Kenny Kirkland didn't make it to the gig,
Okay.
and then they got somebody else that Billy didn't particularly like, and Tim Landers and Mike Stern were playing bass and guitar, and he said, "Man, we're going to Europe, and we got to get somebody." And literally, I had done a gig at 7th Avenue South the week before, and I didn't pick up my amp, and it had my name on
Oh
it.
man,
I seriously, I mean, talk about a movie script.
that's
And then
incredible.
Tim or Mike went, "What about Gil Goldstein?" You know, it was like,
Oh man, are
and
you kidding me?
and he called me, and I went, "Okay, great," you know, and that was my first 6 weeks in Europe with Billy, and Michael Urbaniak was in the band.
Oh shit, yeah.
It was a great tour, and
How was that like? I mean, in Europe, let's say early 80s for you guys, especially with Billy being the band leader. I mean, it was probably
whoops, sorry, my phone just acted
oh.
up on me. I must have said something that sounded like, "Hey Siri." Sorry.
No.
um, um, yeah, I mean, it was again, it was like one of those fast things that I didn't have any time to prepare for, and all of a sudden I was there, you know. So um, I
Yeah,
did the best I could, you know, and I kind of hung in there, and then I worked with Billy for,
yeah,
2 or 3 years after that.
it's incredible. Yeah.
That was the tour that um, where Bill Evans, the saxophonist, invited Miles to come to the Blue Note when we were playing to hear Mike,
Ah,
and
really?
yeah,
Oh man,
so.
that's
And he
bizarre.
was there he was there, and we kind of all knew that he was there to hear Mike.
You remember
And
that gig or like
oh yeah, I
the
mean,
atmosphere like in the club?
yeah, I mean, I have a lot of regrets, honestly, that I
Hmm.
didn't walk up to Bill, who was a friend of mine, and go, "Hey Bill, Gil Goldstein." you know you know but you never know,
Yeah,
because maybe I
yeah.
would have connected with Miles. But it's like Victor
Um,
Lewis, the drummer, told me the story once, that he was at the Village Gate, and I think this is a great story, that he wanted to meet Woody Shaw, and so he's sitting at the bar, and he's like, "Man, I don't know how I can meet Woody." And so he's sitting there, and Woody comes over and sits at the bar, and Victor goes, "That's it. I'm going to go and just introduce myself." And he says, just as he's doing that, a guy cuts him off and says, "Hey, Woody, hey, man, my name's Bob, and I play the drums, and I'd love to get together with you sometime." And Woody goes, "You come up to me on my break and bother me with your stuff, man? Get away from me."
oh man.
And Victor goes, "Oh, man, am I glad I didn't do that." And he said 5 minutes later, a friend of his comes over, and he goes, "Hey, Woody, hey, do you know Victor Lewis? Great drummer."
Wow.
And Woody goes, "Man, let's get together. Let's hook up sometime." So you never know, you
Yeah.
know, when the right moment is. But
Bizarre.
anyway, I did get to have my moment with Miles
Yeah.
with the Gil Evans arrangements.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was a little late in Miles's life, but it was a perfect meeting to have a meeting with Miles, because,
How was that like? Can you like elaborate on
well,
that a little, please?
the
Like,
the best part of the story was that, for me, I mean, I was Gil, and Miles kind of reacted to me like Gil. You know, from the time that I called him to come to the rehearsals to rehearse, I said, "Is Miles there?" They said, "Who is it?" And he said, "It's Gil." He gets on the phone. He goes, "Hey, Gil." You know, I don't think he would have said my name if it
Yeah.
was Richard. You know, and he just elevated me to Gil Evans status somehow, and he just said, you know, he kept saying your band is at he made it my band, and you know, I was very comfortable to talk to him, you know.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I brought him the music. He never did rehearse in New York with the band, but I brought him the music, and he has looked at Moon Dreams, and he goes, "That's not Moon Dreams." I said, "Yeah, it is. Da dee da 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 da
Yeah.
da," and he went, "Oh yeah." And he said, you know, so we had like this kind of very close and friendly
Yeah.
thing from the
Amazing.
beginning, you know,
Amazing, man.
and
Beautiful.
it ended just as fast, you know, because
Yeah.
he passed away about 2 months after. And you know, Quincy was like already like, we're going to do a world tour of this music. We'll do, you know, all the major capitals in the world, and I don't know if that would have ever happened, but I would have loved to have
Yeah.
hung more with Miles, but I only had a
Yeah. That's
short
still
time, but it was perfect. And you know, again, it's like one of
beautiful, man.
those things. Would I have wanted to be in one of the later bands, you know, playing synth? I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. You know, by the same token,
I
I
know what
miss
you mean. Yeah.
you don't know, you know. I might have had a real connection with Miles even then, you know, but
Yeah.
you just don't know. I also passed up an opportunity to play with Sanborn early on because I went to college also at Miami with Hiram Bullock, and he
Oh yeah.
called me to do a audition with Sanborn, and I said, "Oh no, I can't." He goes, "Why?" I said, "I'm playing with Pat Martino's band now." But realistically, I didn't have that many gigs with Pat, and
Yeah.
maybe I could have done both, but I felt like, no, I can't do that, and I just said no. And then I eventually got to work with Dave, you know,
Yeah.
after I thought I blew that opportunity with Dave completely. And I got to work with him with orchestras when he did the record Pearls. I
Oh yeah.
conducted, and he asked me to write arrangements for him, and it was like the perfect meeting. And then I went on to do a lot of arranging on like 5 or 6 of his records after
Yeah.
that. And we still have a great relationship that I don't know we would have had if I had been an
Yeah.
early player in one of his bands. He would have gone, "Oh yeah, Gil, yeah, he's finished." In my opinion,
Oh man.
you know, you just
I
don't
know what you
know.
mean.
But
Yeah. It's funny.
you have to be a little bit lucky when you come together with somebody like that at the right
Yeah.
timing.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Gil, I just wanted to also to ask you this, like, you know, we mentioned Mike Brecker before, and you know, wide angles. It's probably one of the most amazing records Mike did, especially because of this hugeness of it. You know, disregarding his smaller groups. And I wanted to just, you probably explained this many times, but I don't know because also the musicians in that on that album are amazing. You know, it's like the best of the best. And but how was it? How did that call with Mike begin? And I mean that more serious collaboration. And how was it like
Well,
working with him?
oh, okay. So the short, long story of it is I did a tour with Don Elias. Um, I don't. Maybe it was 4 or 5 years before that record, and it was Mike and Randy and Don Elias. And Don asked me to arrange the music, and that was really the first time that I worked with Mike for a, a period of time,
Hmm.
and right away when I started doing that gig, Mike thought of me as the arranger. You know, Gil, the arranger. Gil
Yeah.
arranged this music. It was very simple music. It was like, you know, two horns and a rhythm section, and the music wasn't that complicated, but I was the arranger. And the first day of the gig, Mike asked me to do an arrangement for a concert he was doing in Bologna, where someone named John, always mispronounce his name, Spathes. It's like Psathes. I don't know how it's really pronounced, but he was commissioned to write a piece for Mike. And Mike wanted to have one of his own pieces on the same concert. It was with an orchestra. So Mike said, it was slowly asking me outside the rehearsal if I could maybe. And I said, you want me to do an arrangement for you? He went, yes. So that was really my first arrangement for Mike. And then right after we did this tour with Don, it was in England with this group called the Arts Council of England, and they sponsored tours with different people. And they asked Mike to do a tour called Mike Brecker with Large Ensemble. And Mike just immediately went to me. He said, okay, Gil, so we have a large ensemble. What do you think we'll do? Like, you think brass? And I said, no, we'll have strings and woodwinds and brass. And he went, oh, colors.
So beautiful.
So that was the beginning of the quindectet idea. It was 3 strings, 3 woodwinds, and 2 brass, and a rhythm section that we went to England with. And I arranged Mike's songs. It's Been Real and Syzygy, and
oh man,
we had all those, you know, his hit tunes at that time. And then when Mike came home, he just instantly started writing music to do a record of new music with a large ensemble. And it developed very organically. And the first tune that he wrote was Wide Angles with the bass clarinet line, do 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 do. And he had such a sound of bass clarinet because we had a great bass clarinet player in England.
Ian Dixon,
yes,
right?
Ian
I love
Dixon,
Ian, man. He's amazing. Yeah.
You know him otherwise?
I mean, I have I have him on many records. Yeah, he's like,
yeah,
he's an amazing player.
He is amazing.
Yeah,
and
really good.
and then we liked him so much that Mike wrote that tune thinking of his sound. And then when we were thinking of putting this group together, he said, I think we should get him to come and do it.
That's how he did it. Oh, wow. Because it's funny. It's like US guys, and then it's like Ian Dixon. Like, wow. Yeah, exactly.
He was just so enamored with his sound, that he said, we have to have him, you know. So
so beautiful, man.
And I feel I have to take credit because I really thought it had to be John Patitucci. And John hadn't recorded with Mike on one of Mike's records. And
exactly.
I was really very adamant that it would be John. And I also pretty strongly recommended Antonio.
How come? How did you decide for that? I mean,
it just seemed to me that he played grooves that we needed for that record, and they were very, I could just hear him playing those grooves. And other people, even if it would be, whoever, I thought Antonio expressed it better. That was what we needed for that record. And he said, all right, I go with you here. And I think it was a great fit. And
man,
so I'm happy that
amazing.
And then we thought long and hard, should it be all classical people in the orchestra or should it be jazz guys? we went back and forth hiring who to hire and who to get. And it was just a good collaboration. We always seemed to agree in the end. And it seemed like we made the right
Yeah,
decision.
man, it's
Because,
such a record. I mean,
thank you.
one of the masterpieces after 2000, I think. It's up there
Thanks.
for me. Really incredible.
Thank you.
So, yeah. But otherwise, I just want not to take too much of your time, Gil. I just want to ask you: are you working on something new also as a leader, like under your net? Because you're such a, beside being such a great arranger, like also a beautiful writer of original music, and but you haven't done.
I hate to be stubborn. I hate to be stubborn and say, I'm really just, I don't really have that urge to. And so,
is there like an urge somewhere, like that you would like to do a record under your own name, like again?
I haven't found it yet.
Okay. Okay. Good answer.
But I'm always awaiting for new urges.
Okay. Inner urge. Okay.
Inner urge. I'll take an outer urge.
Yeah.
Give me an urge to do something. I'm all. I feel almost. I hate to say I feel stubborn, but I feel like I'm resisting something if I'm
Interesting.
Is this like therapy now? But for some reason I resist that. I'm resisting that urge to make my individual statements. I would like to do like a record of. I haven't really made a record of standards like a trio playing.
Man.
I haven't even done that. So
Come on,
I feel like there's
you have an answer.
A lot of stuff.
You have an answer now.
Well, it was partly a trick answer because the company Chiaroscuro said maybe you'll be interested to do another record for the Pure as Rain label, and I realized. Why didn't I do even like a trio record back then? Most of the records on that label are, standards. And I'd like to, I have done a record of that probably not a lot of people know, but that I like a lot of. I did an all Bill Evans record with Patitucci and
oh really, man?
And Al Foster. It's hard to find, but it's. I can send you.
Please! Oh yeah. Shit! Well, when was that? Yeah. Like 80s or 90s?
Oh no! It was probably 12 years ago.
Oh wow, man!
And I'm a major Bill Evans fan, and I wanted to record a tribute to him, and I really think it was a really nice tribute to Bill, and John always liked it, and Al paid me the ultimate compliment. He said, "Man, I don't remember ever playing that spontaneously on a record."
Oh wow!
And it's really true. I mean, he really was really very spontaneous. And I had my little stack of tunes for the session, and he called me over and he says, I'm not the greatest reader. And I said, you know what, Al? I don't expect you to be. That's mostly for me and John. And I just want you to listen and be Al Foster. And we would rehearse every tune before we played it. And Al almost didn't play. He just kind of went, okay. And he kind of made a mental map of the tune and played the daylights out of every tune, but totally, really spontaneously. He said, man, I sounded like Max Roach. That kind of spontaneity. And he would say that to everybody. Well, I would meet him for years. He stopped saying it recently, but but it really is true. He was really really on it, and he just reacted, and he was a reactive element, and
beautiful.
And I love playing with Patitucci.
Yeah, man. He's such a player, melodic and yet firm on the groove and everything.
Oh my God! You know, he's
yeah.
the greatest anchor of all
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
But so again, so reactive.
Yeah.
So that's an idea that I have. But thank you for saying that. But I just moved out of Brooklyn, and
Mm.
that was a kind of a big move after 36 years that we
Oh,
just
shit,
moved
yeah.
all our stuff out here. And I moved my piano, and I hadn't been in Brooklyn so much, and now we're more here, so I am playing the piano more and kind of rediscovering, you know, I'm a little complicated in the sense that I love playing electric piano. I really love electric piano. And of course, maybe my biggest love is the accordion. So I'm
Yeah,
always
yeah.
like, I don't
Yes.
know what to make a record on.
Man,
You
that
know?
would be amazing.
Well, you know, there's so many great accordion
Yeah, but
players.
you know, but still.
But I mean, I'm ready. I just don't know what to pick. I'm like, piano is I'm playing a
All of it.
Rhodes. You know, man, I can do all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Anyway, you give me
Beautiful.
an inspiration to think about something.
Yeah, please.
I'm gonna-
Would be
Hey,
beautiful.
thank you,
Would be beautiful.
thank you.
Gil, I won't take too much more of your time, so thank you so much for sharing all these beautiful thoughts and insights.
Thanks for being
stories,
so
so.
interested and having so much passion.
Yeah, I do love this music. Besides being a player and composer, I just have the love for it. So it's just to listen also.
Dr. Jazz. Dr. Jazz.